Am I the asshole for describing my wife as fat to our young children?
Yes, 100%. Yes, you don't have to read anything else. Woo!
You wouldn't have to read. We could just go. Like,
My wife, 41, and myself, 44 male, both work in education and believe in properly explaining things to our children. 4 female, 5 male. We have agreed to never use, quote, because I said so, reasoning with them. My wife is unfortunately around 3 stones overweight. Her weight has crept up gradually since having the kids, and I don't think she has even been aware of this gain until I gently raised the subject with her last year. She agreed she needs to remedy this. Since then, we have worked together to shift the excess weight, and I'm proud to say she's lost around 10 pounds. But she still has a lot of work to do to reach her target weight. She is best at sticking to her diet if there is no temptation around. So for Easter, I got her flowers instead of an egg. She seemed happy with this. Then, yesterday, my children were arguing over a missing Easter egg, each accusing the other of eating it. I knew instantly what had happened. I asked my wife to tell the children where the egg, which was quite big, had recently gone, and she admitted she had eaten it. My son, whose egg it was very upset and confused and asked his mom why she had eaten it. My wife replied that she would replace it, which would be impossible as it's now after Easter.
because
It's on clearance.
Kids care.
No, it's on clearance. It'll be even cheaper.
I pointed out that she has not answered the question our son had asked. He was very upset and kept asking why she had stolen his egg. I felt it was unfair she hadn't properly answered this, as he was getting more distressed. My wife completely threw me under the bus here and said, quote, because I wanted a chocolate, but daddy didn't get me an egg. They already know the importance of healthy eating, so I explained that mommy was not wanting to eat too much sugar. Several, but why questions down the line, and I finally said, quote, because mommy is fat and she needs to work on this by not eating sweeties.
Oh my God. Oh.
I used the word fat because my sister is fat and always says it is not a shameful thing and she prefers to be described this way. She says to not use the word implies there's something wrong with being fat. I probably was an asshole to presume my wife would feel the same way about this term, and I wonder if I should have said overweight instead. My wife hasn't spoken to me since this and has seemed very upset. I feel terrible for upsetting her, but I think she was wrong to have taken our little boy's Easter egg without asking, and wrong to have blamed me for her actions. I regret upsetting her and possibly using the wrong terminology, but I had run out of ways to explain to the children why I hadn't bought my wife an egg. But I do feel I might be an asshole for upsetting my wife.
Oh, you are, bro.
An asshole. Oh,
How about, you know what? I forgot. It's my fault.
I thought your mom would really love flowers more.
Or I forgot. What?
Because he didn't want to be, he didn't want to take any responsibility.
No,
he wanted to be on her. She was responsible for eating the egg. Your mom's fat.
Am I wrong for refusing to let my in-laws meet my newborn? Okay, so backstory. I've been with my partner for almost 6 years. We've just had our first baby together. By just, I literally mean at 3 a.m. this morning. My partner is Greek, his whole family is Greek Orthodox, and they follow all traditions and religion very closely. Anyway, for the past 5 years, I have joined them at church for their Orthodox traditions on Orthodox Easter, and I would like my child to continue in this tradition. But last night, we were at my in-laws for dinner before we headed to church, and I started to feel this agonizing pain and my water had broken. I was 34 weeks, so a bit early, but labor was still a viable answer. My mother-in-law told my partner's whole family that I was faking it to avoid church and that I just want her son to abandon his family and religion for him and our child to join my monstrosity of a religion. I'm atheist. Anyway, my father-in-law then refused to drive my partner and I to the hospital because we were making his wife upset. My partner's sister then told them to stop being ridiculous and making it all about them, and she then drove us. I felt bad she was missing church, so I asked her if she'd like to stay to be part of the birth of her nephew. She stayed and was the biggest support for my partner and I. Anyway, this morning my sister-in-law told me about all of the abusive texts she was receiving from her parents and all of the horrible things they were saying about me. I have always been close with the in-laws, so this is very out of the blue and hard for me to take. My parents came in to meet our baby girl just before lunch today, and I've been receiving texts and calls from my in-laws asking to come meet her tonight after they celebrate their Easter. I haven't replied yet, and they asked to come at 7, and it's getting closer to the time, and I'm wondering if I'd be an asshole for telling them no and setting a boundary. My partner has told me he will support whatever decision I make, and that if I want to wait for them to meet her, he understands after last night. Am I wrong for not paying for my daughter's prom outfit? I, 36 female, have 4 beautiful kids, 2 daughters, 17 and 2, and 2 sons, 20 and 14. Growing up, I didn't have any fun birthday parties and I didn't get to go to prom or any of that since I was pregnant at a young age. I was very happy to see my 20-year-old go to prom and give my kids parties. My 17-year-old has prom this year. Last year, because of my baby girl, I couldn't give her a sweet 16. She didn't want one, but I did push it until she started doing more planning and we sadly had to cancel it before it could happen since we just couldn't afford it. She said she was fine with it and that was all. Here's our issue. Her prom is at the end of the month. Also, this month is my baby's birthday. Her cake costs around $200. She has 3 outfits getting handmade, personal planner and decorations, etc. So with this going on, we can't pay for my daughter's prom dress and all that. My son had a job, so he paid for his own. My daughter has yet to get a job because her therapist claims she can't handle one due to her mental conditions. Yesterday she came to me and said since it was spring break, we should go start looking for prom dresses since we've been putting it off. I told her that I thought she knew we wouldn't be able to get her prom stuff, and she'd have to do that herself by getting a job. She asked me how I expected her to get a job and the money for her stuff, and told her that that was her problem and she was almost a graduate and needed to figure that out herself. Out of nowhere, she burst into tears and started telling me I promised her I'd do this for her. I had, but that was a year ago. And threw the sweet 16 thing in my face and told me she had cried over it for months, which I don't think is my fault since she didn't even want it in the first place. She's refusing to talk to me and said she won't go to her sister's party, just do something with her privately with her brothers involved because it hurts too much, and that she will ask her father to help her with prom. Which hurt me since she's been open about how she likes her dad more than me. It feels like she's only doing it to rub it in my face. I thought my daughter would understand, but she's taking it very personal. But I do understand how I could be the asshole for saying I would do it and not clarifying later on that I wouldn't. Opinions from parents, teenage girls, am I the asshole here?
My husband says I cheated because I texted my ex in Ukraine. I've been married to my husband for 4 years now. We have been together for 7, we have a 1-year-old. I had only one ex and I had him blocked even before I met my husband. My ex had moved back to Ukraine, that ended our relationship eventually a decade ago. Now that the war is happening, I've been thinking about him and his safety and I wanted to see if he was okay. But I did not, as my husband will not like it. But a couple of weeks back, I was so worried and was having nightmares. I unblocked him, and my only concern was if he was alive. He was, and had posted on his page that there were funds collected for Ukraine, but it never reached them, as people were pocketing the money. I was so sad to hear it, and I responded asking for some authentic ways to send help and resources. He responded that he was happy to hear from me, and he sent me a few links and contacts. That was the end of the conversation. I had essentially sent only one text. The next day, I asked my husband if we could send some money to help the Ukrainian people. He frowned and said he'll think about it. This could be because of his aversion to my ex, and also because our finances are a bit tough. Then he texted later from work saying that we could send, and asked to wait to find the best ways. I showed him the links and said that these are authentic. He asked how I know, and I told him the truth. He immediately stopped replying and came home. He asked me to get out. I showed him the texts and said that's all I've spoken, and I told him how I've been feeling about the war and that I tried to speak to him about things but he was dismissive. He said I've cheated on him and asked me to leave or that he will. I broke down crying and he packed a bag and left. He has sent an email saying he will forgive me and come back if I write down an acknowledgement and apology that I committed adultery and will never do it again. I refused, and today he sent me another email that he will file for divorce by the end of the month. I've apologized several times over the last few days and have promised to go to therapy. My ex is blocked again. I simply don't know what else to do. Please help. Edit, adding the following to help answer some questions in the comments. My ex and I parted amicably. I didn't even ask him how he was. Just seeing him active on his page let me know he was alive and was fine. The only message I sent was, can you point me to resources that are authentic and will not be pocketed by others? He then replied with links as well as a text saying that he is happy to hear that I was looking to help. That's all. I didn't even respond to that. There's absolutely no past that can contribute to this fear, but my husband has always hated the mention of the country too. I tried to ask once to see if he'd be okay if I reached out, but even when I asked casually that we should check in on people that we know there, he said no need. We'll hear if they died. That's all. Now he's asking for verbal acknowledgement of cheating if I don't want to put it on paper. This husband sounds like he's manifesting the cheating to happen. I know it happened, I just know it did, and I'm gonna keep mentioning that it's happened until it does happen. This is just so abusive from the husband over nothing. Do you not trust your partner? Is there something going on that we need to be talking about, Mr. Husband? What is this response? I hope you're okay, OP. I would get the hell away from this guy. And now in the comments, your husband seems like he was waiting for you to make the alleged mistake. Yeah, he is way too eager to leave his wife and baby for something so trivial. I really don't think it's anything other than blackmail. Totally. He jumped on this like a starving dog jumps on a steak. He either has wanted to get divorced, is cheating himself, and wants her to be too so he isn't the only bad guy, or wants another way to control her. OP, tell him you will not admit to something you didn't do, as you serve him papers. The same, I was thinking. Cheaters become insecure and aggressive when they suspect their partner is cheating, because they know they are guilty in the first place. Your husband will have to work this through by himself. You have not committed adultery. Get a lawyer and a therapist if you want one, and decide on what terms you want your future relationship with this man. Honestly, he sounds a bit unhinged. This is a text. How much of your life would be under his control for him to feel safe? Would he ever feel safe? This isn't on you. This is on him. Maybe his friends can talk him down, and even so, it could be worth questioning what is in yours and your child's best interest here. Exactly. It sounds like she has to walk on eggshells around him already. That is pretty miserable and abusive in my opinion. If I was OP, I would be taking a long hard look at my life to see if I truly was happy in this relationship. Apology that I committed adultery. This cannot be real. If it is, take advantage of your sin and get rid of your bonkers husband. A written apology that she committed adultery. What the heck does he want to do with that? What emotional abuse and blackmail is in her future if she stays? Isn't that a way to get a divorce / get more out of a divorce? Like if the other person cheats, you can get a divorce without their agreement / without the separation period or something. I feel like I remember hearing something like that before, but I have no real clue, so I could be wrong. That's exactly what this is. It sounds to me like he's planning on divorcing anyways, and is just looking to get more out of the settlement. Why do you need to go to therapy? It's your husband that needs it. He also sounds like a controlling person, and it doesn't sound like the first time this has happened to you. If he's offering a divorce, I'd take it, but make sure you don't lose out on the money, etc. And now to the update. I never expected the original to blow up the way it did, and I thank each and every one of you who took the time to comment and also to DM me. I read all the advice and some of the comments really helped to make sense of things. Before the update, I wanted to address the questions that came up. I and my husband are neither from Ukraine or Russia, so no political agenda here. I did not dream of my ex, but the situation in Ukraine. Also, we've sent money to charities and people in need, so it wasn't unusual to discuss that. On to the update. It is long, and I can't begin to explain what I'm feeling about the stuff that went down in the last couple of weeks. Almost immediately, after posting the update, I called my husband and told him that I was ready to give him what he wants. I just wanted him to come. And we will do it in person in a coffee shop near our place. I got a babysitter and called his brother and his wife to accompany me during this conversation, as I didn't want to be gaslit. I planned to tell the entire story, and also that I will not be admitting to adultery. And if he needed to divorce me, he could, but I won't be giving him anything. He sounded smug and happy on the phone. It was an entirely different story when we met. The moment my husband saw his brother and sister-in-law, he completely changed attitude. He came up and kissed me. He spoke to me as if we hadn't been fighting the last couple of weeks. I just started crying, and he tried to tell it off to the others that I was just tired. But somehow, I got to a point where I was able to tell the whole story. My brother-in-law was furious. He took all of us to his house, and we sat down for a 4-hour talk. It was the worst moments of my life. There was so much screaming, mostly me, crying and swearing. Apparently some commenters were spot on, thinking there was more to this than what I knew. It goes back a decade. Just before my ex left to Ukraine, he did a 3-month course which included working in a firm that my husband interned in. They were acquaintances, and apparently my husband saw me when I met my ex outside the building a few times. He asked my ex about me, and once he found out that we were together, he backed off. That very day, my husband went to his brother and said that he was going to break us up and that he would marry me someday. But almost within the month, my ex left to Ukraine and we broke up amicably a year from then. Once my ex exposed something on Facebook indicating a breakup, my husband reached out to him and asked to set us up. My ex refused, and my husband found someone else to set us up, and that's how we met. Once he got a chance to meet me, my husband reached out to my ex and asked him to block me and assure him that he would never try to get me back. My ex refused, but he finally agreed to ask me to block him, and if I agreed, so be it. And that's the reason I blocked him. My ex asked me, and he said that it would be best for us both. I found it insulting and immediately blocked him, and he stayed blocked. Following which I met my husband, dated, engaged, and married. So for the last 8 years, my husband has been manipulating every single situation around me. And for him, it's always been a threat that my ex refused to block me or even stop trying to get back at some point. And the reason for the extreme reaction now was because, wait for it, my ex reached out on a WhatsApp group that my husband is part of, asking for help to accommodate some members of his family. So my husband was paranoid that he would reach me. And he was very weird with me because he was always suspicious that I was secretly in touch with him since the war started. And he knows that I break easily, and thought by punishing me to write this acknowledgement of adultery, he'll be able to hold it over my head all my life. And I would give him access to control all my communications, and he can monitor my every move. Once all of this came out, from both my husband and some from his brother, my husband started crying and asking me to forgive him. He begged for another chance and said that he'll get help. I'll forever be grateful to my brother-in-law for what he did. He asked my husband to leave, he and his wife picked up some stuff from my house, and he set up their guest room, and that's where I'm staying since. He hasn't let my husband see me since. He apologized for all the things that he knew about, especially stuff before we got married, and he didn't tell me. My husband has been trying to reach me non-stop. I spoke to my ex to collaborate the story, and he apologized for his role. To be honest, I can't accept anyone's apology at this point. I feel so done, and I'm applying for divorce tomorrow. I'll be starting therapy next week. Thanks for reading and giving your input, but I really don't even know where to start and process this. I've left out a lot of details, and to be honest, I still feel like there's so much I don't know. I'm either numb or crying my eyes out all the time, but I appreciate each and every one who took time to check up. And sorry the update is long and not what people might have hoped. TLDR, my husband has always manipulated me, and I will be filing for divorce. And now in the comments, thinking he can forever emotionally manipulate you by somehow extracting a written apology from you is so weird. Like, even if it had all been true, he wouldn't have forgiven you anyway, but hold you as a prisoner that he can control to feel whatever he wants you to feel. Sick. The guy is an abuser. The fact that he chameleoned so fast in front of his brother and wife is the biggest indicator for me. Abusers know how to hide the parts of themselves they know would give them away. My father did it, and OP's soon-to-be ex does it too. Once exposed, they are the picture of remorse, but they only regret being found out, not their behavior. Wow, what an absolute freak he turned out to be. Glad to hear that you're getting the heck out of there. What a strange, strange man. Be very careful and cautious. These are the kind of men who will kill you. Find support from your own family and begin an escape plan of sorts, where you don't need to rely on him or other people within his family. Get a lawyer and keep track of all calls and any weird behavior. You may need to start doing a restraining order. Yeesh, he is a crazy person. Definitely do this, as his brother knew about it, and it sounds like maybe even assisted your husband's manipulations before. It's likely he might be willing to do it again, maybe even thinking it's for your own good to help you get back together with your husband. It's really important to have a support system that is not at all connected to your soon-to-be ex-husband. You definitely need to get a lawyer. Good luck. Hey coworker, I heard you broke up with your girlfriend. Could you set me up on a date with her? Talk about unhinged. I had a coworker do this to one of my friends, also a coworker, almost the same thing. My friend's boyfriend would come to work to drop off lunch or pick her up since he didn't live far and usually had afternoons off from class. Anyway, that's not the point. Another coworker always talked about how cute he was, yada yada yada. 2 years later, my friend and her boyfriend break up. Amicable, as there hadn't been a spark for a while. 2 weeks after they break up, my coworker asks why he isn't around anymore. My friend tells her, and then our coworker asks her to set her up with her ex. The part I don't get, why didn't OP's husband just ask her out? All this nonsense about the ex wasn't even necessary. He didn't even know the ex, so he didn't need the ex's permission to date OP. Not that he needs permission in other scenarios. There was no need to manipulate the situation. At every point, the husband could have chosen to act like an actual human, yet instead chose to act like an alien who dropped on planet Earth the day that he met OP. I'm assuming it's because he didn't actually know her, just that he had seen her sometimes as a co-worker's girlfriend, so he needed to go through actual people who knew her to get her contact info and where to find her. As in, like, he wouldn't have ever found her IRL without some serious stalking. Plus, people tend to be more comfortable if they have a mutual. It's a super wild story, but I don't think that's the wildest part of it. I expected the classic story of a cheater projecting onto their partner. Instead, we got a hard swerve into long-term manipulation. Our next post is titled, Tennessee. Is it arson if I burn down a building that I own? So I just inherited my father's farm. It has a barn where my father used to spend time away from us, drinking and yelling. It's also where he would bring me and my siblings to give us beatings and lock us up for the night when he was mad at us. My brother and I want to burn down the barn with some of my father's possessions inside to relieve ourselves of the memories. Can we pour gasoline and set the barn on fire, or would it be arson? Thank you. And now in the comments, contact your local fire department to see if you can burn it down as a training exercise for them. That way you'll have help on hand to prevent the fire spreading, and they can help you with any necessary permitting process. Depending on the material used in construction of the barn and its usage history, when not used to abuse children, there could be hazardous materials present that you shouldn't burn or that could create toxic fumes. And OP says, I hadn't thought of this. I think it's mostly wood and old tools, but who knows? Understand the intent of just setting it yourself, but checking with the fire department is sort of the correct we have laws approach. The reason they are typically notified is that when people want to burn giant things, they generally use too much accelerant, and the fire either gets out of control or they hurt themselves. The fire department does this all the time, and should be more than happy to hose down stuff around the building before you light it to make sure it doesn't spread, and basically help you make a bitchin' fire that torches the barn without hurting yourself. You don't have to disclose why you want to take the barn down if you don't want, if you're comfortable talking about it. It may help them understand that you are not an arsonist to watch out for. I totally get it, and be safe. And OP says, that's exactly what we want. We'll definitely be calling them. And now on to the update. Hi everyone, came here to give an update as many people asked. The burning of the barn finally happened. We went to the fire department and asked about a controlled burn. They said that it might be okay under certain conditions, but they had to do an inspection first. They made us remove all that could have produced toxic fumes and pollution, like old tires and the ruins of a tractor. The wood was dry and there was almost no paint left, so they said that it was fine to burn. They were actually glad for the opportunity because they had a new guy to train. They said they would do the protection of other buildings and nearby bush, and it would be a productive training session for them. When the day finally came, they let us start the fire. More of a symbol than anything, they did the real starting for safety reasons. The fire had to be helped a bit because it had rained a lot the days before, but then the whole barn was engulfed at once, and it was beautiful in a way. I must say it burned spectacularly well. There was almost nothing left in the end, which is exactly what we wanted. For those of you who were worried about us burning valuable stuff, we did keep some tools and a pile of boards that we will sell, but there wasn't much more than that. Except if you can find value in porn magazines from the 80s, empty bottles, and nude girls' calendars. These were my father's possessions, so we had a lot of pleasure in letting them burn. We added his clothes for good measure. We likely could have sold more of the barnwood, but there was more purpose for us in burning it all down. Probably wouldn't solve the deeper issues of what our father did, but it did bring some relief and some sense of closure. Unfortunately, we couldn't throw the big barbecue party we wanted for the fire department. We did have some beers though, because of COVID restrictions, but we all decided to do it later, hopefully next summer. The firemen were real bros, real cool, but professional, and they seemed to have as much fun as we did. We are really thankful for their help. You rock, guys. And now to the comments. The most important part of arson is the friendships you make with the firefighters along the way. There's something cute about my mental image of the firefighters exclaiming, "Oh, we have a new guy. Can we help you burn this? For training purposes? Win-win." Narrator: they did not, in fact, have a new guy to train, but really wanted to burn down the barn, and it was their best excuse. They just had a controlled burn of a dilapidated house in my town to train firefighters from 5 towns. I'm glad OP was able to find that option. Everyone wins. My town recently used an old condemned bank building for training purposes. First cops had a turn, then SWAT, then the fire department finished it off. It was a fun week to drive by and see what shenanigans they were up to. I don't know why people were worried about them burning valuable stuff. It's just stuff. And if they wanted to burn it to rid themselves in some way of what their father put them through, then so be it. This made me happy. It might be regret from tossing valuables themselves, but I think it just makes a lot of people uncomfortable to realize that the possessions they've spent their whole life carefully or carelessly curating are more than likely going to end up being dropped in a bin at Goodwill, or in this case, burnt. I live to collect odd crap that makes me happy because I love it. Sure, some of it's worth money, but that means nothing to me really. I like to look at it and know that I have it. My kid's dad collects all kinds of crap because he likes it, and it's worth so much money, and he got it cheap, so it's so great. But it sits in boxes shoved in closets or the shed. If that dude dies before me, most of that expensive stuff is ending up in Goodwill because I have no clue on how to sell it or what it's worth. I don't have the time, energy, or knowledge of how to turn it into cash. Our next post is titled, "My fiance may die. His sister wants half of our house if he passes." So my fiance was in a car accident about a week ago. He has a 50-50 chance of surviving, though things have started to look up. His sister is also his birth mother. She got pregnant at 13, and his grandparents adopted him, so legally she is his sister. She has never had any involvement in his life. His adoptive parents died 3 years ago, and my fiance and I have 2 children together and own a house. We have been together since we were 13 and are getting married this October. Our house is nearly paid off, and I can't afford to pay half of the house equity to her by myself. I have no idea what to do, or if she even has a stake in the house. He is 23 and does not have a will. He also has a life insurance policy that she wants half of. I can't even get a lawyer to talk to me without coming in for a $600 plus consult. I'm hoping someone can give me some kind of direction so I can stop worrying about my children and I becoming homeless and focus on my fiancé. This is in Ohio. Thank you. And now in the comments, if you're the beneficiary on the life insurance policy, you owe her nothing. The insurance company also won't give 2 shits about the will. You're not married? Is he on the birth certificate of the children? Generally, children have precedence over parents for inheritance. The Ohio interstate rules are, if a descendant is survived by a spouse and no surviving children or descendants of deceased children, the entire estate goes to the spouse. If a descendant is survived by a spouse and 1 or more children of the descendants, and if all the children who survive or who have descendants are also the children of the surviving spouse, the entire estate goes to the surviving spouse. If a descendant is survived by a spouse and 1 child, or the child's descendants, and if the surviving spouse is not the natural or adoptive parent of the child, the spouse receives the first $20,000 from the estate, plus 1/2 of the remainder of the estate. The balance of the estate passes to the child, or, if the child is deceased, to the child's descendants. If there is no surviving spouse, but surviving children or their descendants, each of the children receives an equal share of the estate. Descendants of a deceased child divide that child's equal share. If the descendant has no surviving spouse or children, and no descendants of deceased children, the estate goes to his or her surviving parent or parents. Or, if both parents have died, in equal shares to brothers and sisters or their descendants. And OP says, "Our children are 2 and 1. Does this basically mean my children and I can continue to live in our home? Or is there some kind of legal process that has to take place for half the equity? I really appreciate your help. As the parent of your children, you also get to manage their assets, half of your house, until they turn 18. So you're going to be okay. Life insurance is all yours if you are the named beneficiary. After your fiancé pulls through, you should both get wills done so you can be sure in the future. And/or married. Being married solves quite a few of these issues. It's the sole reason my wife and I got married, as I had died of a heart attack at age 28, and my now wife kept my brain alive via CPR, and eventually paramedics came and got my heart going again. I spent 3 weeks in the hospital, basically mentally invalid, and during that time, my mum showed up and was basically like OP's mother-in-law slash sister-in-law. When I finally was able to think for myself again, we got married, just to save some hassle for my wife and kids, as I personally owned a house and a vehicle, and had money saved up at the time that my mum wanted to claim. That's from what I've been told, as I was unable to understand any of this while in the hospital. Wouldn't have been hard to convince me to sign anything during that time. So we got married, and since then, besides the house, I've lost most of my assets while trying to get on disability. Many years now, been waiting for word from the state, living on a mix of crap I sold off, and help from family to keep afloat. So been unable to get a proper will done, but also have gotten our papers filled out at the hospitals around house for if we are unable to speak for ourselves. I forget what it's called, but the hospital has you fill out papers on what to do about life support and things of that nature if you are unable to say in person what you want. And now on to the update. My post got a decent amount of attention. I thought I would update since I still get really sweet messages from people wishing me well and praying for me and my family. My fiancé, now husband, did pull through. He's currently in our backyard setting up a tent to camp out with our 2- and 3-year-old boys. He was in a coma for over a month, and the doctors were pretty sure he would never wake up. His recovery was slow, and he still goes to physical therapy 4 times a week, but he's pretty much back to normal now, and we couldn't be happier. Although it was a horrible thing to go through, it changed both of us for the better. You don't realize how much the small things matter until they're about to be taken from you. He was appalled by his sister's actions when I finally discussed it with him. We recently both made wills and made sure there is no chance sister-in-law or brother-in-law will get any money if both of us were to pass. Or, God forbid, our children too. We also chose godparents for our children, and we're expecting a baby girl in 2018. I really appreciated all of the sweet and thoughtful messages that I was sent. They definitely made me feel better on bad days to know how many people were praying for him. And now in the comments, this is why it's important to get wills drawn up, even if you're young, because things can happen with zero warning. 3 children, 0 wills is a bad equation. No, 3 children, 1 marriage, 0 wills is better. Marriage plus wills should be non-zero. Crap like this is why my LGBTQIA+ friends fought for marriage equality and why I wholeheartedly support it. Much easier in an emergency like this to say, I'm the spouse, versus, let me show you all the legal paperwork we set up, I have to contact my attorney. Not to mention the number of hospitals and medical facilities that ignored the partner and let the family swoop in to make all the decisions. I can't believe the sister was able to sign a do not resuscitate. She wasn't his mum because he was adopted, no? I wouldn't expect them to defer to her over the mother of his children, who he is engaged to and living with. Sister or mother, she would legally be next of kin, one of the many reasons why marriage rights are so important. Totally. Every time people are like, marriage is only a piece of paper, I'm like, yes, and without one, someone can significantly screw up you and your loved ones' lives. As unromantic as it may sound, legality for healthcare and in case of death was much of the reason I wanted to get married. I love my husband immensely, and I'm glad that we have that bond, but I'm also glad we have that bond for legal reasons. I want him to be the one to have a say of my care, and I want him to inherit me. I have a fairly severe chronic illness, so even if we got married when I was 28, it felt and feels like a very real possibility that something could happen to me. 5 years on, and we have not needed it, thankfully. Hopefully it won't be an issue for another 60 years or so. And that's where I'm going to leave today's episode, guys. I do hope you enjoyed. If you did, let me know what you thought of it down below, and I'll see you on the next episode. Bye.
My husband, 33, has a friend, Carl, 33, who he considers to be one of his closest friends. My husband sometimes calls Carl his nicotine because of how much he misses him and wants to spend time with him. They do everything together. They're even coworkers working the same job. Unfortunately, Carl's wife passed away from cancer 3 months ago, which caused him to distance himself. My husband felt devastated for him. He recently started spending more time with him and brought him meals. We planned a 3-day vacation to another state. I made a hotel reservation for 2. Unbeknownst to me, my husband had invited Carl to come with us. This made me upset because it spoiled the entire vacation. Not trying to be dramatic, I only found out when he went to pick him up. I sucked it up after my husband explained that Carl is a recent widower who's been wallowing in grief for so long and needed this vacation. The problem is money is tight, and since Carl hasn't worked ever since his wife passed, he couldn't pay for his own room and we didn't have a budget for it. My husband said that we should just share one room. I again sucked it up since he said that we'd be out all day on the beach anyway. First night, I was in bed when my husband and Carl got back. I got woken up by my husband telling me to get out of bed and sleep on the mattress he put on the floor for me, and that he and Carl would take the bed. I asked if he was serious and he asked what else is he supposed to do. He said that Carl was a guest and we can't let him sleep on the floor, and at the same time, I can't share a bed with Carl while he, my husband, sleeps on the floor. I told him I didn't sign up for this, but he told me to suck it up and try to put the Carl as a widower card. I told Carl to get out and then got up and got dressed to go home. My husband started yelling at me, calling me irrational, but I wasn't having it. I left the hotel and traveled back home. Carl didn't say anything when he saw me leave, except that I was making this non-issue an issue. When they got back, my husband refused to even talk about it, but still said that I ruined this for Carl and us and acted aberrantly and disgustingly. I admit Carl is struggling and I might have ruined this for him, but I didn't even know he was coming. Am I the asshole for going home after I got told to sleep on the floor?
Am I the asshole for embarrassing my boyfriend in front of everyone? Me and my boyfriend have been together for just over 2 years. This happened at a family party for his sister's graduation. As my boyfriend gets drunk, his humor becomes very mean. He's constantly making jokes about me and putting me down. He says it's British humor, but I've not seen other Brits do this. Throughout the night, he's making jokes about me which get progressively worse. For example, someone smashed a glass and he told me to stop singing. Then, him and his friends started talking about his ex-girlfriend's butt. My boyfriend then said to me if I could have my ex's body and your brains, I'd be winning. Am I the asshole for embarrassing my boyfriend in front of everyone? I said you don't hear me comparing your tiny pee-pee to my ex's. And if she's that hot, she would need something more to satisfy her. No wonder she broke up with you. He got super mad, stormed off, and I left soon after. He, his friends, and some of his family members are now calling me the asshole for this. When I explained I did the same thing that he did, they said it's different for guys who are sensitive about their size. And to me, that's just pathetic. I know it was petty, but am I the asshole? I also want to say size really doesn't matter to me. It was just a good comeback. Am I the asshole for asking my sister to consume less menstrual products or I won't buy them for her anymore? My 21 male sister, 19 female, moved in with me 10 months ago because she wanted more freedom from our parents. She's in college, and while our parents are paying for her studies, I have to pay for everything else. Since she moved in with me, I handle food, bills, and every other expense. And she's still currently looking for a job. I don't think I ever made her feel like an expense or a burden. Lately though, I've been struggling to fit everything in my paycheck. I even had to ask my parents to give me some money or she would have had to go back home. The issue is she consumes too much menstrual products.